Good evening, folks. Hey, virtual pilots. We've got a very impromptu live stream this evening. I never learn my lesson. I always do these extraordinarily randomly. I always mean to schedule them. I always run out of time. Real life got in the way today doing very, very boring accountancy type stuff. But we have got a great flight this evening. We're off to Jersey. Every time I say that to my wife, she says Jersey. I can't do accents. But no, it's not the American Jersey. It's the OG Jersey, the one in the English Channel. That's EGJJ, flying there from one of my favorite airports, Bristol, in the Kodiak 100, which is a brilliant payware aircraft, easily my favorite aircraft in the game. Now, I've foregone what I would normally do, which is to dial in all of the flight plan painstakingly in the G1000. That's going to be about as exciting as watching paint dry, so I have done all of that. We're on a parking ramp in Bristol, so I think without further ado, let's wade on in, let's get in the aircraft, and let's get taken off. Okay, so here we are on the ramp in Bristol. We've got FS knee board with our standard instrument departure out of Bristol, so we'll get the battery on. I've pulled the breaker on the small standby display here. It's an absolute frame rate killer. We'll get the parking brake off, and we'll get our good friend there in his pushback truck to give us a hand. I'm pleased to report that this is not an alcohol-free flight this evening, so we are drink flying, I'm afraid to report, or pleased to report. Nice cheeky Sauvignon Blanc that I picked up from Naked Wines for anyone that's in the UK. So we're in the general aviation parking area here at Bristol Airport. We've got the payware Bristol Airport. I did a video of that a couple of weeks ago. I mean, it's incredibly detailed. You can use the developer camera. You can go inside the buildings. Absolutely fabulous. 90% of which you can't see from the aircraft, but it excites me nonetheless. Okay, right, let's get this aircraft powered up. Let's get our beacon on. Want some fuel. Okay. Keeping an eye on ITT, engine temperature. Going low idle. Waiting for that to come up to 50. It's at 50. Get that off. And high idle. And high RPM on the propeller. Get our alternators on. You can see here we've got our flight plan already dialed in. As I say, that would have been about as exciting as watching a cup of tea go cold. Takeoff from runway 27 today. We'll get ourselves taxied out. Yeah, the frame rates are much better when you've got that that display switched off. For those that are leaving comments in the chat, I have not yet mastered the art of getting chat in the VR headset. I'm pretty close to doing it, but have you filed VFR or IFR? Well, I'm flying IFR. We're certainly doing an instrument departure and we're doing a instrument approach. Have I filed it? I've certainly not filed it to the ATC in Microsoft Flight Simulator, which the last time I tried to use it told me the ILS runway was in one direction and the takeoff and landing runway was in the opposite direction. So certainly when we get on to doing some VATSIM stuff, Mr. Me, I will certainly be filing that stuff properly, but in VATSIM I'm more likely to get some more helpful instructions. So for the sake of this stream, let's assume that I have filed and it's an IFR flight. Right, let's get ourselves onto the active runway. Quite a high elevation here at Bristol, 610 feet if you can believe that. It's for anyone who's been to Bristol in the UK, I went to uni there. I mean, I had thighs of steel. I mean, it's so ridiculously hilly. And just walking from one university building to another was like finding your way to base camp at Everest. And get some forward trim on this aircraft. It really does have a tendency to want to pull up, even in taxi actually. Just doubling back here. We don't need to do that really. This aircraft certainly doesn't need the full runway here at Bristol. And if I'm not sure if you can see that clearly on the stream, but one of the brilliant things about this Payware add-on runway is they've taken, I mean, the base runway for Bristol in the game is flat as a pancake, and the runway at Bristol is anything but flat. Anything but flat. Right. So, we are going to want to be 3,000 as we come out at a distance of about 4.5 statute miles. We're going to want to be 3,500 when we get to Somop, 5,500, and I know we want to be at no higher, no lower than 6,000 when we get to Exmoor. We've got that departure programmed into the G1000, so we're going to be going on to autopilot pretty quickly. And frankly, I'm not going to mess around with all these other altitudes. I'm just going to get myself up to 6,000 pretty promptly. Vertical speed of about 1,500 feet a minute, which this turboprop aircraft, I don't know if it's the VR headset on my eyesight, but honestly, I'm really struggling to see things the last few days. Right, we want 20 degrees of flaps in the Kodiak 100. Let's get our heading bug on the runway heading so we can hold that as we come out. And we're going to want not VOR. We're going to want GPS. Grand. Right, we're all set up and ready to go. And the parking brake off. See, a funny thing there, I mean, I had my feet on the foot brakes. As it took the parking brake off, it didn't actually register that I had them there. I actually had to take them off and put them back on. As great as this sim is, it's still got some real odd quirks in terms of how the inputs work. Right, we're going to get some RPM up before we take the brakes off. There we go, heels down, feet off the brakes. Don't want to go full power in the turboprop. I want to be at sort of 95% power, there or thereabouts. 60 knots, rotate. She done half wobble about as she comes up. First notch of flaps out. Second notch of flaps out. Okay, let's trim up to 10 degrees. Got the flight director there giving us some instructions. We're going to climb a little bit higher than the flight director is suggesting. At 1,000 feet, we'll start bringing the RPM back to 2,000. That's good. I'm still on manual at the moment. Let's put a little bit more power in. Starting our turn out, coming up on 2,000. Okay, looking good. So we're using a standard instrument departure out of Bristol. And Bristol's a fairly big airport, does a lot of international flights, but it's relatively simple in the grand scheme of things, actually, from an instrument departure and arrival perspective, which is also part of what makes it one of my favourite airports. The same is true actually for Jersey that we're flying into. Coming up on 4,000 feet. Looking good. Well above the altitude that we need to be. Those of you in the UK, you probably guessed we're not using live weather this evening. It is not this bright and sunny even during the day, and given that it's night time, it's certainly not this bright and sunny today. Still on manual. Overturn there. I'm not going to quite follow what the flight director is suggesting, because we'll correct ourselves soon enough. Coming up 6,000, we're going to power back, and oh, we've overshot ever so slightly, but nothing too dramatic. Right, increase the power. And we'll get ourselves trimmed for straight and level flight. Not bad. Still on manual at the moment. Sort of becomes a great way of looking out at the scenery when you're on autopilot, but you know, I really love flying the aircraft. That's why I fly traffic patterns endlessly. I am going to put the autopilot on in a bit, and actually, despite the name of the channel, I'm actually going to flip back to the 2D version of the screen. I want to spend a little bit of time chatting about stuff that we've got coming up on the channel. Actually, some of the videos that we've got coming are going to be... I'm genuinely very excited. We've got a great long list, a great long backlog of really exciting videos coming in the not too distant future. Plus I want to be able to read the chat, so anything meaningful that we're doing in terms of flying the aircraft, takeoffs, landings, instrument departures, instrument approaches, we're going to do all of that in VR. The sitting over the English Channel and looking at blue sky and blue sea, we're gonna do that on a flat screen monitor, so I can have a bit of a chat with you chaps and chapettes. The instrument departures seem terrifying when you start looking at them. When you start looking at the approach plates, like I've got down here on the knee board. But really, it's all in the prep. It's all in the prep. If you've adequately prepped, you've understood which active runway's in use, you've properly reviewed the plate, instrument departures, instrument approaches, ILS landings, they should be boring and uneventful. That is the whole point of the process. It's a real funny aircraft, the Kodiak 100. I mean, it's got quite a slow rotation speed in the grand scheme of things of 60 knots. Generally lifts off the runway at about 70 knots. You want to be about 80 knots as you cross the threshold on a standard runway. Short field landings, you want to be at about 76 knots. But it'll cruise quite happily at 170 knots. It's got a powerful engine in it. They're just awesome. Now, I think for me, you know, not everyone's going to like to play this in VR. I know some people suffer with motion sickness, or their PCs don't, or they don't feel their PCs have got the horsepower to run it. I mean, I can run Microsoft Flight Simulator, albeit with some compromises, on a 1080 non-TI, which is a system that my daughter has got upstairs, and it runs. I mean, it is playable. Particularly with motion reprojection, you can get some very good results. Get the aircraft trimmed for straight and level flight. So I think there are many people that work off the belief that they can't fly Microsoft Flight Simulator in VR, and I mean, the great travesty of all of that is that it's more a consequence of spending some time getting it set up, you know, understanding how Steam VR or Windows Mixed Reality works, getting that set up and working correctly, and getting things like motion reprojection. I know there's mixed feelings about motion reprojection in the community. I absolutely swear by it, particularly the Steam VR motion reprojection. I've got mixed feelings on Windows Mixed Reality, but there's a video on that coming. But they do a very good job. If you can get to 40 frames per second, better yet 45 frames per second, Steam or Windows Mixed Reality will do the work of adding in those missing frames, and you'd be surprised. You're not playing a fast-paced shooter game. It's a simulator. You can work perfectly well off of 40 or 45 frames per second, and the perceivable view is going to be very smooth indeed. So I think what we'll do is we'll get ourselves onto this next turn. And you can see here on the G1000, that's a great long leg. We're going to cut across the west country of the UK, Somerset's the county, out into the English Channel and across to Jersey. I was umming and ahhing about whether to do this in the Kodiak 100 or to do it in the King Air. I did a trial in the King Air. Great thing about the King Air, massive displays with the Garmin 3000 and its touchscreen. It's a beaut to use in VR, and I think it looks good on stream as well. Big downer, like all of the base aircraft, it's just on rails. It just doesn't have that dynamic flight mechanics, even with the new prop physics. And Microsoft Flight Simulator development team have done a grand job with feathering the prop and one engine landings. Again, I did a video on that not so long ago, but the overall flight mechanic compared to this aircraft, no comparison. I've got the Just Flight Pipers as well, PA-28, 3 naturally aspirated and turbo, and the 4 turbo, and again, they just feel great when you use them. You probably noticed that we've appear to have come off our flight plan. a little quirk of the G1000 is it does want you to fly over the waypoint. It doesn't cope overly well with us cutting the corners, despite displaying them on the screen, which seems a bit bonkers. Now the flight director just makes the whole process easy. Okay, I think we'll get the autopilot on. Established at 6,000, 165 knots. And we're on our GPS. Oh, you're a controller at Cardiff, Mr. Me. A controller at Cardiff in VATSIM, or a controller at Cardiff in real life? Not flown into Cardiff. I spent an awful lot of time there when I was at university as well. I realise this is almost like sacrilege given the name of my channel, but it's an awful long time to sit and stare at not a lot. And as I say, I want easier access to me wine, and I want to be able to chat with you good folks. Oh, controller in real life. Question. I mean, I hear from lots of people that that's very stressful as a job. Your take on that? Stressful, enjoyable? Thought we'd spend a few minutes just talking about stuff that's coming up on the channel. The first thing really to talk about is the cockpit, my desk / cockpit. I am increasingly finding, as I'm producing more and more content on here, that the amount of time I spend setting this up and then taking it apart, because this is the same desk that I'm doing all my sort of video editing at and stuff like that, that I can be setting this up and taking it apart about 5 or 6 times a day, and it's not an insignificant amount of time each time I do that. So it's increasingly feeling like having some sort of permanent setup set up, or the flight sim itself with the cameras permanently mounted, the yoke, the throttle, and most importantly the rudder pedals fixed properly to something that isn't going to keep moving. And I've got the pendular pedals from Thrustmaster, and they are weighty things. Actually, if I push my feet onto them, I'm on a wheeled chair. The chair pushes back, which is frankly part of the problem. So I've got 2 problems that I'm trying to solve here. One is the setup and takedown time. The second is a wheeled chair is just really not that suitable for flight simming. So I've decided, after having done a bit of research, to build myself an extruded aluminium cockpit. Decided to do that myself. I've decided to do that for two main reasons. The first being every extruded aluminium or aluminum if you're in America, aluminium here in the UK. Every one that I've come across is clearly designed for racing sims. Don't mind a bit of racing myself, but that's not predominantly my use case, and they lack the space for the throttle to go. You've got that sort of central component for, I guess, what is the steering wheel to go on, but you don't have that space off to the side for a throttle quadrant, so you could offset your seat to one side. You're going to end up with some balance and stability problems if you do that. So I've decided to build my own so it's fit for purpose for my needs. Second reason is it's going to make it damn sight easier to modify it in the future. So I've ordered a bunch of extruded aluminium from they claim to be a UK supplier. I think they are a German company actually with a UK website, but the delivery fees in this world of escalating inflation and interest rates was not too bad at all. So we've ordered that. I've got I don't know if you can see this on camera, not really, it's quite dark back there, but I've got a GT Omega, a seat that I picked up very reasonably on discount for 140 UK pounds. The plan is to get that mounted on there, get the yoke mounted on there, the throttle mounted on there, and the pedals mounted on there. That seat has no twist, it has no wheels, it will all be far more secure than what I'm using today. And of course there will be a full set, I'm going to say videos, because I don't think that I'll get that done in a day. I think that's a good few days work, but yeah, that's going to be good fun and a slightly different change of pace. A relaxing job, Mr. Me. Yeah, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, well, I guess that's like any job to an extent, isn't it? It's great when the weather is clear and it's nice clear sailing, and when the chips are down, that's the test of anyone's true character. And Kyla Hoffman was going to buy the Thrustmaster Boeing yoke, but then saw your video on the honeycomb yoke and throttles and ordered those instead. Yeah, I think if you're doing general aviation aircraft, or if you're doing general aviation aircraft and airliners, and you're doing both, I think the Alpha yoke is a better choice. It's, I mean, it's cheaper to start with. I actually think the build quality is probably a little bit better. The plastic is certainly nicer on it as well. The Boeing yoke, I mean, it is a great yoke, there's no doubt about it. I mean, if you watched my review of it, I had less flattering things to say about the throttle quadrant, which frankly felt like a bit of an afterthought in the grand scheme of things. But the yoke itself, I mean, clearly a lot of thought has gone into that pendular rocking design, and I've got to give it to Thrustmaster. It's a very innovative design. I mean, I still have it behind me just here, and I certainly use it when I'm flying airliners, but I mean, the Alpha yoke's a great product, absolutely great product. And if you're GA, if you're only GA, I mean, it's a no-brainer. You don't want the Boeing yoke, that doesn't make sense. And if you're splitting your time between the two, I think the Alpha yoke is the better choice. If you are flying the Dreamliner exclusively and nothing else, yeah, I mean, and particularly if you're in VR as well, I mean, the immersion that you're going to get from that rocking mechanism backwards and forwards. And if this and nicely takes me back to actually one of the other reasons that I'm setting up the extruded aluminium cockpit is getting those things lined up broadly so that they appear from a perspective where you see them in VR. That's a massive build on immersion. It's great. You pull back on that thing and you see that thing in VR responding. That's massive from an immersion perspective. I have just realised, folks, that we shouldn't be at an even altitude. We're a 0 to a 189 heading. We should be at an odd altitude. So let's get that changed. Get ourselves down to 5,000. Slowly. Don't need to rush. We want to build up a load of speed and just take some small amount of power out. Quite easy in this aircraft to suddenly be overstressing it because you're going too fast. A very happy Wednesday evening to you all. I hope you're all safe and well. Clearly events in Europe distressing, certainly for the Ukrainian people. I think would say distressing for us all, and count our blessings that we're sat in relative comfort, that we're in the situations that we're in. But back to the topic of upcoming content on the channel. So we talked about new cockpit build, video about building an extruded aluminium cockpit. That's going to be great, by the way. I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really hoping that extruded aluminium is going to come in the next day or two. I've also got, arriving on Friday, another yoke. So this time it is it's an Xbox yoke. Its name has just escaped me. This is an age thing, but it's the Xbox yoke that's got a throttle quadrant attached into the yoke itself. Turtle Beach yoke. So that's coming on Friday. We're going to be doing a review of that. Ages since I've done a peripheral review, and I really do enjoy those. So looking forward to doing that a lot. Got a whole heap of reviews of aircraft coming up, some old, some new, many of which are new to me, even the old ones, some airports. It's just a fantastic time for Microsoft Flight Simulator. There is so much going on, so much development going on. The new prop mechanics are just fantastic, frankly. I mean, we're getting into X-plane levels of realism. We've got the prop wash landing. We've got Sim Update 9, the Iberian Peninsula, so that's Portugal and Spain, with a world update that's dropping this month, and just more and more. I mean, so much so that the development team are having to talk about what's actively in work and what's on the backlog, and that they do a monthly live stream on Twitch, by the way, which is highly recommended. They're quite long, those videos that I've been doing, the news in 4 minutes. It's about an hour and a half's worth of live stream sort of compressed into 4 minutes. So if you've got 4 minutes, then stick with my videos. If you want to go a little bit deeper, would definitely go and subscribe to the Microsoft Flight Simulator Twitch channel and their YouTube channel, because they put the live stream up as a video on YouTube as well. But I mean, they could talk for hours and hours and hours quite comfortably, quite happily about apparently they've got 250 engineers actively working on the development of Microsoft Flight Simulator, and I'm personally, so I just kicked the yoke there. See the aircraft rocking about, not the yoke, the rudder pedals. I'm delighted that X-Plane have got a new version coming out. I'm a bit like with my CPUs. I don't have any particular brand loyalty. If AMD's going to give me the best performance, I'll go with that. If Intel's going to give me the best performance, I'll go with that. I sort of hold similar-ish views around flight simulators. I've used both in the past. I've certainly used Flight Simulator X extensively. I've used X-Plane 10, X-Plane 11 extensively. I mean, X-Plane 11 being the first one that I had a VR experience in, which really started to get me hooked. But I think with all of these sectors, I mean, active competition always is going to be good for the consumer. You're all, you know, I mean, would Microsoft be actively developing Microsoft Flight Simulator in the way that they are if a new version of X-Plane wasn't coming out? I mean, we'll never know the answer to that, but I do think the X-Plane team, they've got their work cut out for them. I mean, there are certain things that Microsoft can do in terms of just how beautiful they've made the sim look, and with all of the photogrammetry on the cities and the integration with Bing and some of the AI stuff that they've been using. I mean, they've got access to that because they're part of the broader Microsoft ecosystem. X-Plane are going to be very, very limited on that. So I suspect what they're going to do is double down on the realism of the sim, and for many that will be a reason to move, no doubt. They've got their certification again, which will be a reason for people maybe to make the move. But I mean, the big challenge with these things, right? I mean all of you will know, flight simulators are complex things, not just in terms of flying the aircraft. I mean, in terms of getting the things set up, working, getting your payware and freeware add-ons integrated in. As someone who's had to recently reinstall this PC not so long ago, it was a monumental task to get everything reinstalled to such an extent I couldn't actually remember all of the payware stuff I've had. I've actually had to write a list down in case I ever have to do that again. And sort of labouring the point here a little bit, but to get people to make that move, if someone's deep within the Microsoft Flight Simulator ecosystem and you want them to make that move, you've got to have something pretty special. That's an investment of time, right, to get all of that payware stuff up and running. That is challenging. To be at flight level 70 to remain inside controlled airspace too. I don't believe we're in controlled airspace, albeit we may be. Like I say, it's a hybrid VFR IFR flight, and I'm sure many of you will go, what the hell does that actually mean, Mike? That's my flag out of your challenge. We're gonna remain down at 5,000, I think, because yeah, it just becomes too much hard work getting the aircraft to do what I want it to do later on. But yeah, I think X-Plane they've got their work cut out, no doubt about it, to get people to make that investment in time to move from one flight sim ecosystem to another. And certainly for the casual simmer, I think the beautifulness, shall we call it, of the sim, I think that does matter to people. And I think you end up with two camps of people. I think you end up with a camp of people that are all about the realism, people like myself that will fly traffic patterns every single day just to keep your currency and proficiency on the handling of the aircraft. And then there are some people, there are loads of people that spend loads of time in flight sims who can't land the aircraft, period. They're quite content to just take off, fly around, and just sort of be in awe at how beautiful it is. So I do think you've got slightly different markets of people. But yeah, I mean, it's good times for flight sims, and given how long came between Microsoft Flight Simulator X and what we've got now in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, I don't know if anybody can remember the cheeky Microsoft Flight Simulator release that came out, I think, in probably 2008 or 2009. It was very, 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 very arcadey. I distinctly remember getting very excited about it coming out, and I bought it, albeit I don't think it was a lot of money actually, and was extraordinarily disappointed when I got it installed. I mean, it wasn't a flight simulator. I immediately went back to FSX. If you go, I mean, even on the Wikipedia page, I think, of the history of Microsoft Flight Simulator, it's a bit like the Star Wars Holiday Special. No one talks about it. We all pretend that it didn't exist, but it definitely did exist. It was 2008, 2009, and it was abominable. In fact, I was on holiday reading, I think PC Pilot was when I first got excited about it, but Microsoft, they make no reference to it. Wikipedia have got no reference to it. It's like it never existed, but it did exist. It did exist, Virtual Pilots. It did exist, and it wasn't good. Right, let's have a look and see how we're getting on. I think we're going to need to switch back into VR in the not too distant future. We're about halfway out there. Standard instrument approach. Transition altitude is the 5,000 feet that we're at, so for those that are challenging me, that's part of the reason why we're at this altitude. Just makes that transition easy to do. We need to maintain, I think it's 2,200 until we're, I think it's 5.4 statute miles out. I'll double check that on our approach plate in a minute. We're not on VATSIM, so we've got no controller support. Not that I think that you would get a controller in VATSIM in Jersey anyway. Oh, not impossible, but unlikely, I would suggest. And I'm certainly not using the Microsoft Flight Simulator one that the last time I flew into Jersey was telling me that one direction was the ILS runway in use, but the other direction was takeoff and landing. We were using, I mean, to be fair, we were using live weather, and it is pretty stormy here in the UK at the moment, but that does not make a whole heap of sense. Just going to get myself a little top up. Of course, if I was flying real aircraft, I would not be doing this. One of the beauties of being at home at 25 past 9 on a Wednesday evening in flight sim. Looking forward to the PC-12 eventually coming. I've not seen that. I don't know what that is. I'm assuming that's an aircraft of some description. Have you, those in chat, is there any particular aircraft that any of you have as a fave? Do you fly the base planes? Have you got payware like the Kodiak that we're in here today? I would definitely recommend getting some payware aircraft. I held off on it for a very, very long time. I have quite the penchant for the Baron G58, not particularly the Microsoft Flight Simulator version of it, but more just as an aircraft. I just think as a naturally aspirated aircraft, it's an awesome piece of kit. It's a great bridge between the smaller Cessnas and turboprops and bigger aircraft. I just do genuinely love that aircraft. Right, I think I'm going to get myself back into VR. It feels like we're getting to the point that we're going to want to start to think about descending and getting ourselves sorted out, so bear with. Well, we've ended up sat back here in a passenger seat, which is not where I think we wanted to be. are just not the same on a flat screen monitor. I actually find myself quite disorientated if I play on a flat screen monitor, and it's not because there's a problem playing on a flat screen, it's just because I'm so used to doing it in VR. Right, let's get our charts up. Yeah, so we've passed Big No, so we're on this route here, coming down into Guernsey. As I say, it's a nice, simple approach. Area min altitude 2,200. In the absence of ATC instructions, I think we will start a descent down to that altitude. And we're going to start taking some power out as well, because we don't want to be going at light speed as we land ourselves in. That's all fine and dandy. We've got all of that dialed in on our GPS. Let's get our ILS plate up. Okie dokie, so 11090. Ourselves onto heading, see if we're picking up the ILS just yet. I suspect we're not. I suspect we're way too far out. Yeah, we are. 11090, 11090. Yeah, we're just too far away. That's fine. Get ourselves back on GPS. One of the shortcomings of the base G1000 in this for the Kodiak 100 is it's not very good at indicating on the speed ribbon the 10 degrees, 20 degrees and full flap speeds. In the NXI version from, I can't remember the name of the company that did it, but there's a freeware add-on version of this. It does have some different coloured strips on the speed ribbon for those speeds. I find it really, it's definitely a better G1000 implementation. It's just really, really hard to see in VR in comparison to this one, and that I think would be some of my feedback that I would give to them. It's just the colours. It's not the resolution particularly. The resolution's fine. It's just the colours and the way that they've got it set out. Faster, more luxurious Kodiak 100. Oh, I love the sound of that. I shall be Googling that after this stream. It's there any third-party aircraft support? Depends on where you've got the third-party aircraft from, but generally companies like Just Flight, etc. are pretty good if you've got a problem. And pre-built PC recommendations for a decent price. You're probably asking the wrong person, Kyla. I'm a bit of a custom PC build sort of chap, so all my PCs are custom built and water cooled. There's certainly, and that is not me being disparaging of pre-built PCs, by the way, because there are a load of really very high quality, very good pre-built PCs with very, very good support. If you don't want to do your own tech support, and I often wish I wasn't doing my own tech support. I'm not the best person to help you with that question. I'm sorry, buddy. I'd love to help, but I don't buy pre-built PCs particularly myself. But that's not me being disparaging of them at all. There can be some very, very, very good reasons in order to go down the pre-built PC route. Probably the best answer I can give you is I know overclockers do pre-built PCs, and I'm sure Scan probably do as well. My general sense is overclockers support a little bit better than Scan. GFX card prices are on the way down. Yes, they are indeed at last. Yeah, 40 series cards. Yeah, I mean, wow. I have mixed feelings on that, because I do think that Nvidia should be fulfilling demand for the 30 series cards they've been unable to ship to people. They've done some very cheeky things in terms of driving prices up. Yeah, Scan are pretty good, as are overclockers. You've got Alienware, you've got HP. There's plenty of good choices, and they do come with some nice support packages. Actually, you just want to take the pain out of any future problems. And trust me, as someone who, I often say to my wife, every day is technical support day. Except I have no technical support. I'm it. It's and all you want to do is jump into the sim and fly. It's very frustrating indeed. Right. Where are we? 3,200. Okay, I think we want to expedite that descent a little bit. Start taking some more power out. I can see Guernsey in front of me. And like every flight that I do, not a lot happens for a jolly long period of time, and then everything happens all at the beginning and all at the end. Oh, it just looks spectacular. I realise I get feedback on a lot of my videos about it can feel quite shaky in VR, and it is, frankly, when you're watching it on a flat screen monitor, but your head is quite shaky when you're talking. Your head naturally shakes. Your brain sort of adjusts for that. And I'm talking not in a VR headset. I'm talking naturally in real life at this point. It's the same in VR. I don't perceivably see any of these shakes. I can't begin to tell you how much more immersive it feels, like you're actually sat in the aircraft. And before, for those of you that may have been around on the channel for a little bit longer, it used to be called Tower Tech, and it was a sort of random smorgasbord of water cooling and home automation, and it was really before I decided what I wanted to do. It is perceivably smoother when you're in VR. It really is. The immersion is incredible. So my apologies, folks. I'm probably going to be a bit less interactive with you all. Starting to get ourselves set up for our descent. Okay, that's good. We're at 2,200. We're below our first flap extension speed, which is 148 knots. We're at 147 knots. We're good to go. We're probably good to go in for a visual approach if we want to. One of the things that I am very sloppy at and need to get much better at in the sim is getting the right lights on at the right time. That is incredibly important when you're in a real aircraft and incredibly easy to miss. I'm a big advocate of using flight simulators to support real world training. I'm training myself in the real world. My instructor has mixed feelings on the use of flight simulators, as do I. Very good for what I'm going to call cockpit competency. Very good for understanding where things are, understanding what instruments do, stuff like that. Also very good at getting into some very, very, very bad habits early on, and when you get into those bad habits early on, they stick, and they stick bad. Perfect. Okay, we've got our ILS reading now. That's grand. So just flying over Guernsey. Pretty small islands just off the coast of France, of Francais. Jersey, sorry, I should say, that we're flying into today. Again, I've got Payware Airport. Looks fabulous when you land in it. Massive improvement on the base airport. There, just on the horizon, I can see Jersey, our destination. Right, so we need to maintain 2,000 feet until we're 5.3 statute miles out. G1000 is going to take care of all of our heading, etc., but it's 83 degrees. Slight tailwind as we come into land. It's 4 knots. It's not enough, frankly, to make me want to change the approach. Getting our first notch of flaps in. Beauty of getting the autopilot to do that. It's going to take care of all the trimming, stabilization, etc. Here, FS Realistic doing its job. It's got the kind of that drag wind noise that's generated by the flaps going down. I'm very tempted to take her in manually, you know. We've sat and chatted for the majority of the evening. Very, very, very tempted to take her in manually. Why the hell not? Find the earlier out you do this, the easier it becomes. You leave it to the 11th hour and then all of a sudden you've sat there, you've relaxed and you've suddenly got a load of work to do. So we want to be getting down to 128 definitely. Ready for our next notch of flaps to go in. In fact, it's not 128, it's 118. A lot of speed that we need to lose. The white arc on this particular implementation of the G1000, that's full flaps implementation. There we go, right. Next notch of flaps. I'm going to go high RPM. And start our turn in. I realise that's not what the flight director's doing, but I'll let you in on this, folks. The flight director is often not right. I mean, 8.3. So we want to maintain our 2,200. Okay. We've got the runway in sight. Okie dokie. .3. Oi, easy. And that, folks, is one of the biggest differences between real life flying and flying in the flight simulator. When you look down at your plate in a real aircraft and it starts pitching, yawing, rolling, you feel it. Makes you look up. Don't get any of that in a flight simulator. Right, we're below our final flap speed, but we're far too far out to be doing that. Of course, as you slow the aircraft down, you increasingly lose control authority. Right, we're past our 5.3. We can start descending. We're way above our glide slope at the moment. Nothing that I'm going to lose any sleep over. Nice, bright, clear day. We could do a visual approach in if we want to. Frankly, from a visual approach perspective, we're looking good, but we are high. Catch up on that glide slope. She's coming back. The key is to remember to put some power back in as you pitch up. The power going in, nose coming up, and we are looking good. Nice. Still a little smidge high. Happy saying we're spot on, but because we've got the ILS, you can see that we're not. We're a little bit on the far side. Want to be below 98 knots to get our final notch of flaps in. It's looking good. Let's get our final notch of flaps in. High RPM. Little touch on the slow side, get a little bit of power in. A little bit high, so take the power out, let the nose drop. There we go, we're back on glide slope. Looking good here, folks. A little bit on the low side. And here's Microsoft Flight Simulator at its best. The ILS says that we're bob on, there or thereabouts. The Pappy slow.
That's how you land an aircraft.
Votes of approval from FS Realistic there. Using the reverse thrust for absolutely no reason at all. This aircraft, this runway is perfectly long enough to use the brakes, other than I just love the way it sounds, and it's nice to use the detents on the Bravo throttle quadrant. Right, get some braking in. Get the flaps up. Then you get to see the beauty of the Payware airport that is Jersey, as my wife calls it. Again, I can't do accents. Noticeable drop in the frame rates when you get down here on the ground. Frankly, it's a trade-off I'm willing to make for... I mean, it's not just the buildings and the runway, it's all the vehicles that you get. Fire trucks that we've got here in front of us. The tower over there. It looks great. Largely, if you're looking out ahead, It's not a problem. If you turn your head fully to the side and you're looking a little bit fast into that corner, it's me wittering away, not concentrating on what I'm doing. If you turn and look your head at the side, you will see some stuttering as reprojection sort of struggles to keep up, the on-ground elements easily being the most challenging. Welcome to Jersey, virtual pilots. Here we are. Parking brake on. Full feather of the engine. Should have gone low idle when we came off a taxi. We also should have put the landing lights on, but again, like I say, bad habits that can develop in the use of simulators. Despite settings to not let the switching off of the bus take you out, you still get that weird jittering thing. And she's cold and dark. So that's the end of